Every once in a while, there comes a song, a movie, a piece of art, or a television show that transcends its medium to become its own entity. It defines entire cultures and generations, and while it may not be for everyone, anyone who falls in love with it becomes forever enamored by that thing. The character we're going to be discussing today belongs to one such show that's captured the hearts of anime and manga fans across the world. We're of course talking about the show JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The show has been referenced in countless TV shows, video games, and movies besides its parent medium, anime and manga. Underneath all of the memes and hype, there's a solid anime with a well-written plot full of interesting villains and heroes, all of whom have their own motivations. While JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is home to some of the most colorful characters in all of anime and manga, the focus of our video today is the most popular, iconic, and flamboyant villain of the series, Dio Brando. For context though, for those unfamiliar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, here are a few things you ought to know. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is the longest ongoing manga series if we're looking at the number of volumes published to date, which numbers to 134 volumes as of April 2024. It's the brainchild of mangaka Hirohiko Araki and made its debut in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine in 1987. The series has 9 story arcs, with each following a new protagonist who bears the nickname JoJo and battles vampires and other supernatural creatures. The series has received numerous anime adaptations that have covered the various arcs of the series, starting with an OVA in 1993, which adapted the 3rd arc of the series called The Stardust Crusader. It would receive another anime adaptation that would cover much more of the manga from 2012, running all the way to 2022. Dio Brando is the overarching antagonist of the series, and he is the individual responsible for setting the plot of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure into motion. He's the main antagonist of the series' 1st and 3rd arcs. You could say that Dio is arguably more popular than even the series protagonists in the eyes of some fans, such as the charisma of this supervillain. From his stylish outfit to his over-the-top poses, this man has stolen and captivated the hearts of the audience like a true vampire. He plagues generations of his adoptive family members long after his death. Even if someone hasn't watched the series so far, it's hard not to have heard his name as a fan of manga and anime. Dio is a great example of a villain done right. He doesn't have some grand motivation originating from a sense of injustice he feels towards the world, he just wants to dominate the world while looking fly at the same time. Shallow as that might seem, Dio's character is far from that, as we'll find out during the course of this video. Not only that, we'll talk about his powers, origins, personality traits, and much more, so stick with us till the end as we dissect and analyze the character of Dio Brando, the most flamboyant and evil vampire in the history of anime. Origins and early days. The origins of Dio Brando are one of humble beginnings marred with a history of abuse and neglect. Born to an alcoholic father named Dio Brando, who constantly abused his wife and child, eventually leading to his mother's death, the young Brando grew up as a misanthrope, which he concealed at the time. After his father, Dario, passes away, he's sent to the Joestar estate to live with George Joestar, who adopts him as a family member unconditionally. Dio owed this stroke of luck to his father being mistaken by George as his savior during a carriage accident which killed his wife, while in fact, it was Dario who had caused the accident in order to rob the nobleman. Having finally escaped his father's life of squalor and poverty, along with his abusive father's grasp, the sociopathic tendencies of Dio would begin to surface. Thanks to his natural charm and charisma, Dio would consistently upend the heir of the Joestar family, Jonathan Joestar, who was also his age. This would earn him heaps of praise from an unwitting George, while he berated his son for not being able to measure up to Dio. While appearing as a friendly young man in front of George, Dio would take any opportunity to torment young Jonathan, who was still quite naive, as expected of someone his age. Upon arriving at the Joestar estate, Dio immediately tries to assert dominance and tries to intimidate Jonathan by kicking the young boy's dog in disgust when it approaches him. He also gets into a physical altercation with Jonathan after Jonathan tries to help him with his bags and luggage. Dio continues to undermine Jonathan in front of his father and the other children from the village. After seeing Jonathan's closeness with a local girl by the name of Erina Pendleton, Dio forces himself on her, making her kiss him in front of the other boys. Disgusted, Erina stuffs her mouth with mud to remove his taste, indicating to Dio that she considered him to be lower than dirt. Upon seeing this, the villain flies into a rage and attacks her. Before things escalate to a greater degree, Jonathan, after being informed of what was transpiring by one of the onlookers, confronts Dio. The two initially get into a fight in which Dio seems to be winning. Jonathan, however, delivers a series of blows and headbutts to Dio, knocking him to the ground. Some of the blood from Dio's face splashes across the room onto a stone mask on the wall, which, unbeknownst to the two boys, reacts to it and drops to the floor, having grown several rows of spikes along the inside. Dio then attempts to kill Jonathan with a knife, but before things can escalate, the two of them are stopped by George, who witnessed the fight and sent both boys to their respective rooms as punishment. We are introduced to Dio after a small time skip showing that he's entered a private school with Jonathan. However, we are given the initial sense that the grudges of the past have been left behind as the two seem to get along rather fine. He's grown up to fulfill his potential by becoming a model student and an excellent athlete. It doesn't take long for us to find out that underneath the veneer, it's still the same old Dio who, utilizing his masterful sociopathic tendencies, was merely pretending to have forgotten the old wounds of the past and his true goal. Upon returning home, Dio wants to continue his master plan of taking over the family fortunes of the Joestars for himself. To this end, he starts by planning on poisoning the now aging George Joestar, followed by manipulating events and people to disown Jonathan from his inheritance. Unfortunately for him, Jonathan catches wind of his nefarious plans and the two engage in a fierce fight. Unlike their previous scuffles, this time both of them are out for blood. After receiving a beatdown from Jonathan, a desperate Dio lunges at him with a knife intent on killing him. However, George would shield his son from the knife and die in the process. Amidst the chaos, Dio, who had learned the secret about the stone masks, used it to transform into a vampire. As the scuffle continues between the two, Jonathan impales him on a statue before setting the estate on fire, with Dio still inside. However, it's unknown to him that Dio would survive the fire. Dio would then go to hide in the town of Wind-Night Laud and terrorize its denizens. His adoptive brother would, however, trace him, and once again the two would engage in mortal combat. This time, however, Jonathan, having learned the ways of a technique called Hamon, which allowed him to channel power energies thanks to a specialized breathing technique, would destroy his entire body, leaving him only with his head. Despite not having a body, Dio would live on thanks to his vampiric powers, making him immortal. Dio would then ambush Jonathan and his wife Erina on a ship during their honeymoon with the help of his two zombie minions. His disembodied head would lunge towards Jonathan and crush his throat before he was able to use Hamon. During the scuffle, Jonathan accidentally sets the boat on fire while destroying one of the zombies. Dio's goal had been to kill Jonathan and steal his body, but the two sink with the ship and Jonathan dies holding Dio's head. We later learn that Dio had once again survived this incident and actually taken over Jonathan's body. From then on, he's appeared as a constant thorn in the sides of Jonathan's descendants for several generations. What are Dio's personality and goals like? The name Dio translates to God in Italian, which is fitting due to his huge God complex and how he views others in comparison to himself. Dio is someone who wishes to be viewed as a larger-than-life character who stands on top of every other living creature in the world. He suffers no equals. Everyone that he comes across is either meant to be used to further his own goals or die if they stand in his way. He enjoys being in positions of power and isn't afraid to gloat to anyone who can be bothered about it. On the other hand, as we've already mentioned, he will suffer no equals, and the very thought of someone being considered at the same level as him is enough to throw him into a violent fit of rage and deeply disturb his mental state. Due to this, he is always seen surrounding himself with much weaker individuals than himself, for instance, his zombies and other weaker stand users. His never-ending desire for power, along with his boundless ambition, can be traced back to the abusive and miserable part of his early childhood thanks to his father. Growing up in that sort of environment probably made Dio want to put himself in a position where he'd never be at the mercy of anyone ever again. He also came to loathe the world and its people out of spite and hatred for not sharing in his misery, which later changes to him looking down on them once he gains power. Dio exhibits classic sociopath personality traits. He has the ability to blend in with society and make himself look good in the eyes of others if he so desires, all the while secretly harboring malicious intentions towards people. There's also the fact that he attacked pets as a child. According to studies, psychopaths usually have a history of abuse themselves and are known to have attacked pets as children as it gave them a twisted sense of power and authority. Despite being a megalomaniac psychopath, he still manages to attract many followers thanks to his undeniable charisma. Whether through his words, appearance, power, or philosophy, Dio has always managed to attract people to himself. This is seen when, in his early days, he's able to earn the favor of George Joestar and the boys of the village so easily. Later on, he's also able to attract cronies such as Vanilla Ice to his service. This leads us to another one of his character traits, which is the fact that Dio is a highly manipulative individual. Whether it's by making people fall prey to his charisma through the use of honeyed words or by forced coercion and blackmail, there's nothing that Dio will not do to manipulate individuals to further his own goals. This shows that Dio is not capable of ever loving anyone wholeheartedly. The only person who could make a case for this would be his mother, but with her death, most of his empathy and goodness left. The two other people besides his mother for whom one could say that Dio had something akin to respect and affection were Jonathan Joestar and Enrico Pucci. There is a tiny part of him that acknowledges Jonathan's strength and considers him a brother. As for Enrico, Dio thought of him as a friend. Even then, he betrays both men, the former by stealing his body, and the latter by manipulating his friendship to fuel a much grander plan in an effort to further himself. Dio is an extremely selfish individual, as one can see from all the character traits that we've discussed so far. He believes that being selfish and evil is a virtue. According to him, men of morals are bound by rules such as honor, while evil people are unfettered by such rules, making them mentally more resilient. One can see how this affects a slight shift in character from how he was immortal and after he turned into a vampire. As a human, sinister as he is, Dio is way more methodical and calculating, taking a much more measured and insidious approach to executing his plans. While he is still all of these things as a vampire, once he embraces his evil nature and is no longer bound by mortal concepts like morality and honor, his approach towards problem solving becomes much more direct. While previously, he would have operated from the shadows, as a vampire, he takes on a much more hands-on approach to things and isn't afraid of using his powers in a much more arrogant fashion. If the situation demands the use of direct force, or depending on his mood, if he's not up for humoring and playing the long game, Dio is not averse to using his vampiric powers to get the job done. We see these character traits in him even as a young boy when his goals were simply to usurp the Joestar family fortune. Dio is portrayed as a character with an endless ambition for power, wealth, and station. There was no way that his lust for these things would be satiated within the span of a mortal life. By gaining immortality, he found a means to pursue these things eternally. Some villains seek world domination, others wealth and power. You even see villains looking for retribution and vengeance, but Dio wants all of that and more. He's the personification of avarice, and his goals and motivations are a mere reflection of that. What does Dio Brando look like? The eternal King of Flair, Dio Brando will drain you of your blood and will look fabulous doing it. Born with a natural charisma and good looks, which are only enhanced after he becomes a vampire, he has a bit of a complex about being the best looking person in the room. But that's okay because he's an attractive man with an eye for fashion. Vampires have always been portrayed as bewitching, and the same holds true for Dio. According to Mohammed Avdol, one of Joseph Joestar's friends, Dio exudes a bewitching, almost sensual aura. He is also said to have a soothing voice along with a gaze which is extremely piercing. As if to reflect his dark transformation, Dio drops the veneer of his prim and proper looks of a privileged nobleman and instead adopts one that is more befitting of his inner nature. His once well-kept blonde hair becomes disheveled and messy. Dio also develops fangs along with his eyes, adopting a much sharper look with darker lines around them. After his initial battle with Jonathan, Dio begins wearing a completely different attire. He's seen sporting a purple scarf around his neck, and for his upper body, Dio has a white and maroon top with brown leather armor held down by leather straps with golden buttons that run down either side of his chest. He also seems to have a leather vambrace made of the same material as his chest piece. Dio's pants have the same white and red dual tone as them, with purple accents on his thighs. He completes the look with a pair of brown knee-high boots with purple accents on the shin. This was the outfit he would don for most of the Phantom Blood arc. In the third arc of the story, Dio returns to being the primary antagonist once again, but he has a very different outfit. This is arguably the more flamboyant and iconic of his outfits. He wears a black, skin-tight, full-body tunic underneath his orange-tinted crop-top jacket. He no longer has the purple scarf around his neck. Instead, it's been replaced with a steel band around his neck, which meant to provide support to his severed head on his new body. Dio is also seen wearing chaps like those worn by cowboys in Western films. He wears a green belt with a heart-shaped buckle with loose suspenders that fall on either side of his hips. The heart-shaped motif adorns his head as a circlet and his knees as knee guards as well. His legs are protected by a pair of ribbed sabatons. After draining Joseph Joestar's blood, Dio's appearance morphs once more to an extent, but he retains most of the appearance that we described above, except for the jacket and the heart-shaped headband, which were destroyed by Jotaro's Star Platinum. Dio's usual mocking facial features and panache are lost, and he's seen looking more feral, disheveled, and homicidal. As if the clothes reflect his personality, the author uses the state of his clothing to reflect on Dio's mental state. In this form, his hair is far wilder and his dark countenance is further enhanced by his lips, which look far darker than usual. As discussed earlier, for Dio, being better than everybody meant that he needed to look better than everyone else. Such was the deep-rooted nature of his obsession with being at the top above everyone else. When he's in control, no matter how much damage he takes, his clothes reflect that. However, as he gets desperate and begins losing his sense of control, this too is reflected by his outfits. Clothes and appearance play a major role in Dio's character. Powers and abilities. Enhanced healing. After turning into a vampire, Dio gains the power of healing and restoring his body despite suffering severe injuries. He's seen healing bullet wounds to the head, healing a cavity in his stomach after getting punched through by Star Platinum, and even surviving getting sliced vertically in two. Dio is able to come back from all these attacks good as new. His healing abilities are so strong that they heal him faster than fire can burn him. Dio can reattach lost limbs by extending his blood vessels from the affected area and recollecting them, which allows the two parts of his body to meld together good as new. Superhuman physical attributes. As a vampire, Dio has strength, speed, and agility that far exceeds that of mortal men. He's seen being able to easily bend steel, dismember, and punch through flesh. He's also seen running at extremely high speeds and reacting to attacks with supernatural agility. Speedwagon even compares Dio's speed to that of a cheetah. As further proof of his superior agility, he's able to jump several feet high in his battle against Jonathan to outmaneuver his opponent. His punches are so fast that they leave after images due to their immense speed. Dio is also seen walking on walls and easily deflecting super powerful attacks like Hierophant Green's Emerald Splash. He is even seen being able to pick up and toss a road roller at Jotaro after absorbing Joseph Joestar's blood. His strength is said to be at least 5 times that of Zeppeli and Jonathan combined. His immense, almost limitless stamina, thanks to being a vampire, is almost never talked about. He can continue fighting and use an endless barrage of punches and kicks seemingly without tiring. Dio is considered weaker than the Pillar Men, however, his biggest feat of strength is carrying that massive ego all over the place. Freezing technique. Dio has the ability to freeze objects and living tissue by absorbing their heat and vaporizing the moisture in his own body. According to him, he cannot use this technique in later episodes and chapters because the stolen body of Jonathan Joestar is incompatible. Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. Yup, that's the name of the ability, we didn't just make it up. Imagine Space Ripper Stingy Eyes is the last thing you hear before you die. That's why we love JoJo though, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Jokes aside, while the name of this ability sounds absolutely goofy, the power itself is anything but. While it might look like laser beams at a slight glance, they're actually not composed of light. Dio has a unique ability which allows him to pressurize the liquids in his body and eject them through his eyes as concentrated jet blasts. Highly pressurized and concentrated streams of fluids are capable of cutting through nearly everything in existence, from concrete to human flesh, with ease. The Space Ripper Stingy Eyes uses this concept, allowing Dio to fire these blasts over several yards to devastating effect. Transmutation of Flesh. Dio has the ability to transmute his own flesh along with that of others to a small degree. In his own personal case, you can see how, even as a severed head, he's able to latch on to a new body and transmute it to become a fully functioning body with access to all of its previous owner's powers and strength. Dio primarily uses this ability to create unholy combinations of creatures like chimeras, which he kept as pets. He also has the ability to create dull but powerful creatures called zombies, such as Doobie, Jones, Plant, and Bornum, to name a few. These creatures have no free will of their own and are bound to follow the orders of Dio, even if the command given were to result in their death. While being nowhere close to as powerful as a vampire, these creatures can prove to be more than a challenge for the protagonist and his allies. Thanks to them having no human emotions and a severe lack of sensory awareness in regards to things like pain, they can prove to be juggernauts that can catch anyone who underestimates them as mere minions unaware and cause severe damage. Dio is also able to create tiny parasites from his hair called flesh buds, which burrow into the heads of his victims, giving him the ability to manipulate the actions of even those who were previously immune to his hypnosis. Once the parasite has invaded the skull of its victim, it starts eating their brains slowly over time until they're hollow, mere slaves to Dio. Any attempts to remove the parasite from the victim's brain can risk causing permanent brain damage, meaning it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when the victim's brain becomes toast. Not to mention, if the person attempting this removal isn't skilled enough or knowledgeable about these flesh buds, their own body can be invaded by these parasites. These flesh buds buds attempt to invade the body of would-be rescuers by using tentacles that directly attempt to burrow within the person's brain. The spurs come with a major side effect that pertains to Dio's death and the effect it has on them. If Dio were to die, those affected by these flesh buds would be transformed into horrifying abominations, as seen in the case of Manasuke Nijimura. Manasuke is an abusive father who transforms into this horrible creature with insane regenerative abilities, making him almost unkillable. The other side effect of being implanted with these flesh bloods is that the stand of the affected person is heavily affected, making them unable to use their full potential. The buds can be removed with extreme precision. Possessed by stands like Star Platinum, they're also weak to sunlight or hormone, being vampiric like their origin. Complete hypnosis! As is the case with most vampires in traditional media, Dio too possesses the ability to hypnotize his victims. He's able to do so by projecting his energy from his eyes into the victim through their eyes. They become his thralls, unable to deny his commands. We see him use this ability on Jack the Ripper to make him his servant in the series. Yes, the infamous serial killer is nothing more than Dio's puppet, but he already had established a reputation as the Ripper before he met our favorite vampire. Later in the series, Dio's own natural charisma, along with his flesh bud, which is more effective in granting him control of individuals, makes this ability redundant. There are some individuals who are resistant to this technique and can be dispelled by those who practice Hamon, making his hypnosis not always reliable. Blood-sucking! This is Dio's most definitive ability to prove that he's a vampire. Just like all vampires, he needs to suck the blood of living creatures in order to survive, but unlike all vampires, he doesn't do so by sinking his fangs into them. Instead, Dio sucks the blood of his victims through his hands. He sinks his fingers into their body, preferably the head, and then proceeds to drain his victims of their blood in that manner. Just like traditional vampires, not only does the blood satiate his hunger, it also allows him to regenerate and regain his strength. When weak, he may lose control of his bloodlust and attack people till he's satiated. One thing we should mention is that even though Dio is seen sucking the blood of his victim through his hands on occasion, that doesn't mean he can't use his fangs like a normal vampire. The world! After he stabs himself with a mysterious golden arrow from Egypt that he finds, Dio gains an ability called the World, which turns him into a stand user. Stands are people's life energy, which is transformed into entities with unique power. Those who are capable of summoning the stands are, therefore, called stand users. In Dio's case, he manifests one of the strongest stands in the entire series, called the World, which allows him to control time itself. It appears as a muscular, masked man with golden armor with slightly bluish-purple skin. Its power and speed are shown to be as powerful and fast as that of Jotaro Kujo's Star Platinum. The World's ability to stop time is initially a closely guarded secret of Dio, but once the ability gets figured out by his enemies later in the series, he drops the pretense. Following this, in typical Dio fashion, he begins flaunting this ability, confident that nothing could stop it anyways. While using this ability, Dio appears to be moving at a speed that cannot be tracked by the naked eye to onlookers and his opponents. The World is a stand that's effective for close-range combat and functions around 2 meters away as well. From Dio's body, however, there have been times when it has extended itself to operate around 10 meters away as well. In the beginning, after just discovering the World's broken time manipulation powers, he was able to channel it for only about 4 seconds. By the time he fights Jotaro during their final encounter, he's able to extend its effects up to 9 seconds. During his last desperate final stand against Jotaro, his ability improves further, and he's able to stop for 11 seconds. And it's insinuated that had Dio lived longer, he would have been able to stop time almost indefinitely. Hermit Purple number 2. This is a stand that was awakened by Jonathan Joestar's body and is under Dio's control about the same time as Dio awakens his The World ability. It's similar to the Hermit Purple used by Joseph Joestar in almost every single way. The stand allows the user to project vines from their bodies, which they can use to capture psychic photographs by striking objects like a camera or television. Using this ability, he can track the location of the Joestars and their allies, allowing him to send his henchmen after them. He's also able to tell when Joseph uses his own version of the ability to take psychic photographs of himself. Considering that both the Hermit Purples are the same, the stand seems to have the ability to integrate itself into electronic devices and take control of them. In the series, we've seen Hermit Purple being used to take over the controls of a fighter plane, a video game, and Cessna's electronic system. Joseph Joestar even uses the vines as a mode of transport by swinging about. It's more than likely that Dio doesn't fully use the powers of Hermit Purple because he doesn't need to, as he's too powerful as is, but partially also because he would hate to rely on the abilities of others whom he sees as beneath himself. Is Dio immortal? Owing to the fact that he is a vampire and their kind is shown to be immortal as long as they aren't killed through bodily harm, the answer would be yeah, Dio is immortal. That said, it's not easy to dispatch Dio to the afterlife, a lesson that would be learned by his numerous enemies and the Joestars. Thanks to his nearly indestructible body, regeneration, and healing, it's almost impossible to kill him. Dio also doesn't age past the point in his life where he becomes a vampire. There are methods to kill him, which we'll discuss in the next section, so stay tuned to find out more. What are Dio's weaknesses? Despite being able to survive dismemberment, burning, and getting split in half, amongst other things, Dio can be killed. As expected of a vampire, sunlight is extremely dangerous to Dio. If exposed to it, he would meet the same fate that most other vampires in popular media do, i.e., he would burn to ashes. He's, however, not weak to garlic, silver, or crosses like the traditional vampire. The other major weakness of Dio is the technique called Hamon, an ancient form of martial arts. Through the use of specialized breathing techniques, the practitioner of Hamon can create energy within their body that has the same properties as solar energy. This energy manifests in the form of ripples throughout their body and can be used to manifest a number of abilities which are fatal to any inhuman creatures like vampires, zombies, and the Pillar Men. This is the technique due to which Dio loses his entire body, except for his head, permanently. It shows that any part of a vampire that's destroyed by Hamon is incapable of regenerating or healing, leading to Dio trying to steal JoJo's body. He can also be killed by stand users with sufficient power, as seen during his final clash with Jotaro, where he's killed by Star Platinum. Marvelous verdict! In an interview, Hirohiko Araki admitted that he had considered Dio to be the main protagonist of JoJo's Bizzare Adventures, which is why he debuts in the same episode as Jonathan. His darkness was meant to act as a foil to Jonathan's light. This is probably the only instance in which a villain of the series was considered to be the main character instead of the good guy by the author. We don't know if Araki's position changed regarding this point of view in the latter days. What we do know is that Dio is ranked number 10 in Araki's personal top 10 favorite characters in 2002. Of all the memes that JoJo's Bizzare Adventures has spawned, Dio is responsible for the majority of them, including Kono Dio Da, It Is I Dio, and It's Useless, / Muda Muda Muda, to name just a few. The memes, along with the onomatopoeia style of drawing and animation, which is further enhanced by his iconic poses, have made Dio transcend his medium and become one of the most recognizable characters in all pop culture. We at Marvelous Videos think JoJo's Bizzare Adventures needs to be brought before a much larger audience, and just like we managed to do with our Claymore series, thanks to your help, we hope to be able to do the same with this title as well. We've got a number of episodes in the works regarding characters from this iconic series, so if you have any suggestions regarding what you'd like to see us cover next, hit us up in the comments. We've deliberately left out information from the light novels as they haven't been written by Araki and hence aren't considered canon, but for now, we've come to the end of this video. We cover all your favorite anime on our channel, so be sure to check that out after you're done here. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now, but you can always find me on Twitch, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. We hope to see you soon in our next video, and until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.